We got Nebraska heading to Maryland, and Nebraska is favored in this one by 6.5. Maryland, of course, coming off the heartbreaking loss against Washington, where they led for the entire game, and then Washington comes back, scores 24 unanswered points. Sidney Stewart will be back for this one. He was just out for targeting. We'll see if Maryland's defense continues to play well. Nebraska has a sneaky good secondary. They're not getting a whole lot of love, and they've done a good job this season. So, really, two good defenses in this one. Specifically in two areas, Maryland more in the run game defense, Nebraska more in the pass game defense. Mike, what's your thoughts on this game?
Um, I think Nebraska has really impressed me this year. I've been a bit of a Nebraska hater just because they've kind of like always been pumped up every year. And this is really the first year where it feels like they're kind of worthy of some of that hype. They've dealt with some tough environments and tough wins, like the Cincinnati win early in the season impressed me. They looked like a class above Michigan State last week. Um, I think this is one, especially given Maryland's propensity to just kind of like fall apart in October. They're 1-7 in their last 8 games in October, dating back 3 years now. The clock looked like it struck midnight last week on the Terrapins. The September, I think they realized it was October and not September anymore, and not to hate too much, but um, I think Nebraska finds a way to pull this one off. I think their offense is better. I think they're similar. I think Maryland's defense is a little bit better, especially their front seven. But I think Nebraska finds a way to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, at Maryland, it's been well documented. They've not been great in October. They do a really good job in September, and then they get into Big Ten play, and they've not been great. I do think there's more hope for this year. I'm leaning more toward Maryland myself, but I do see where you're coming from, and I think that honestly, this one's kind of open because Nebraska, once they get into Big Ten play, they've really struggled lately, and then
Sure.
Maryland, once they get into October play, they struggle. Now you have a stat to back it up. Go ahead with your question and your stat.
Yeah. So, like I said, uh, can Maryland avoid the patented Locksley October death spiral this year? They're 1-7 in their last 8 games in October's the last 3 years. They've only had one of those games against a ranked opponent too, so it's not like they're just rolling into three top 10 teams each October. Um, and I've listened to a lot of content around Maryland because I try and like backload like future opponents for Rutgers to try and get a pulse on where they're at. Multiple Maryland content creators have talked about how devastating of a loss this was this past week and how they don't remember the last time that they felt this demoralized after a loss. And
Wow.
you got to imagine if the team kind of feels half as bad as the content creators do around Maryland, this is going to be a tough game to kind of fully work themselves up. They've only had two sellouts in the last 3 years at SECU Stadium or Siku Stadium, however they pronounce it. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Um, and one of them was last week. And you got to imagine there's probably not going to be the same kind of amped up crowd for this Nebraska game. I think it's probably going to be a lot of Cornhuskers fans. So just knowing how they travel to Rutgers, I imagine they have a similar contingent coming up to the Baltimore area. So I do think this is a spot where Maryland is kind of a gut check for them if they can kind of rally around the loss and not let one loss turn into two. But I have the Cornhuskers winning this game.
Yeah, what's your score prediction? Go ahead and give it.
I have the Cornhuskers winning 31-24, so I have Nebraska covering and the over hitting.
Yeah, I think this one's really interesting because it does hinge a lot on what you were talking about there with right the motivation to still play. This is a young Maryland team and you were riding a high wave, right? You won 3 games and you're out of conference. You go to Wisconsin, you kind of spank them however you wanted to spank them over there, and they really did nothing about it. And
Yep.
then you go into this game against Washington and you're spanking them as well, but then Washington comes back and it can be demoralizing for a team, especially a young team, if they don't have all the headspace there to be able to move on from it. So this will probably be one of the biggest tests of Mike Locksley as a coach. Now, I like the matchup for Maryland here. It's why I'm picking them, but I also just don't know how Maryland is going to respond. One of the reasons why I like the matchup is because Maryland's offense, or Nebraska's offense, does not match up super well against Maryland. Maryland does a really good job of stopping the run. Nebraska does not have a great running game, and so they rework that a little bit with their passing game. But Maryland has really good pass rushers of Sidney Stewart and Zayheem Mathis, and so if those guys are going to be able to get to Dylan Raiola, who's not shown the most mobility, he showed more mobility last game against Michigan State, which was good. But we saw what happened in that Michigan game. By no means am I saying Sidney Stewart and Zayheem Mathis or TJ Guy and or Derek Moore and Jayshon Barham or anything like that, but they are very fast and they can get around guys, and we'll see if they can finish off and take Dylan Raiola down for 4, 5, or 6 sacks. I don't think that's out of the question for this game. And if that does happen, I like Maryland to be able to hold Nebraska to very few points here. Daniel Wingate and Trey Reddick are two of the top 5 Big Tens in PFF stops. PFF stops are basically like you're basically stopping the run game from having a successful run. If you want to have a successful run, it's like 3 or 4 yards on first down. And Daniel Wingate and Trey Reddick have been consistent at doing that against every team, not just the Towsons of the world, but last game against Washington, Daniel Wingate had 6 stops and Trey Reddick had 5. And those are very good averages for 2 players. So, and Washington, I know they ran the ball well in the last one. They had over 100 yards, but Jonah Coleman only had 57 yards on 18 carries. So only 3.2 yards per carry. It was a difficult game for Jonah Coleman, and with my money, he's one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. So we'll see if they can stop this Nebraska running game, and if they're not going to be able to help out the run game with the passing game because of the pass rush. Nebraska might have a long day trying to move the ball on offense. We'll see how it works out. I have Maryland winning, like I said. I have them winning this one 24-21. I don't feel great about it because I just don't know how the team is going to respond, but that's what I have it. And Zach has it 24-20 Nebraska. So Zach's with you on this one. He's taking Nebraska, or he's taking Maryland to cover, but Nebraska to win and taking the under. So
yeah, I don't feel super strongly about that game in particular, but we got to pick a score for each one, and that's what I'm going with.
That's what we're doing. So all right, we'll go with it. Okay, let's see. We got a lot of good people in the chat tonight. Appreciate you guys being here. Let's take a moment, see what you guys are saying. Michael says he'll take Maryland. Sean is also on Maryland. James says time for Nebraska to level up. I do think this would signify some leveling up for their program if they can get this one. Sean says Nebraska D-line isn't great. Think Maryland can take advantage of it. Maybe. I mean, Maryland's hardly been able to run the ball all season long, but if there's a team they can run against, it should be this one. So, John says Maryland only beats up on the low competition in September. We'll see, John. We'll see. I do not disagree that that's been the trend the past few years. So we'll have to see if it continues. And last one from Tony says Maryland's defensive line can really rush the passer. Raiola isn't mobile like Damon Williams. Yep. Raiola has some mobility to him if he takes off at the right time. His issue is that he doesn't have the quick burst to be able to get away from guys if he's slow with his takeoff. And unfortunately, that's what happened to him a lot in that Michigan game. So, all right.